Hello and welcome to Euromonitor International podcast series. I'm Nadejda Popova and I'm the Senior Project and Insight Manager at Euromonitor International. And today we're here to talk about the 6 key themes in the evolution of physical space in hospitality, which is one of the very dynamic industries. I'm here with Alex Jarman, who is the other author of our recent report on the topic. This is our third edition of the report, outlining the very latest developments that are impacting this segment.
Hey Nadia, thanks for having me here. Really excited to be talking about this report today. Like you said, this is our third edition of the report, and I think what's really exciting about this edition of the Evolution of Physical Spaces report is, I think we really tried to step back and ask, how are physical spaces interplaying with other spaces? For a long time, when we thought about physical spaces, right, we thought about them in opposition to digital spaces. I think in this edition of the report, we really tried to think coming out of the pandemic, 2 years on from 2020, how is physical space making itself unique, but also how is it in conversation with digital spaces and even now the metaverse?
Yes, absolutely. And I think what is quite interesting and quite important, I think, is that the control now is with the customer, isn't it? Who is the one that would choose the type of experience they would like to have, and that ultimately is delivering that instant convenience and gratification across the physical, the digital, and the metaverse domains that you've mentioned. And as a result of that, most of the physical spaces are embracing more flexibility, more functionality, so that they can adapt to these consumers' everyday lives, activities, and preferences.
Yeah, for hospitality providers, it really is the consumer in control here. I think we talk about physical spaces, but, it's sort of hard to talk about any of these individual types of spaces, be it physical or digital, really as a monolith at this point. They're all incorporating different elements of one another. And it's sort of a balance for hospitality providers of dialing up and dialing down individual parts of or individual advantages of each of these different types of spaces.
Exactly. And I think it's very important here for us to highlight what do we capture and what do we believe the hospitality industry comprise, right? What we're focusing here as part of this report is the market for experience-driven services, right? And that can span across travel, mobility, food service, but equally retailing, luxury, finance, and any other industries. And that's what we've tried to capture as part of our analysis in this report.
Yeah, and I think those experience-driven services, coming out of the pandemic, many of these services, travel and food service especially, were really on pause. So now that we're seeing them come back, we're able to see, what is their post-pandemic life and how have they changed both by hospitality providers' availability, what type of services can they provide now, but at the same time, how have consumers changed?
I absolutely agree with you. And as part of that transformation of the um, consumer preferences and the lifestyle, I think we're seeing buildings becoming more multifunctional. For example, having residential, commercial, administrative, making sure that you kind of, as a traveler, as a consumer, you have easy access to these different services, but at the same time, you address any issues of seasonality, because if you think about the travel and tourism industry, it's very seasonal.
Hmm.
And creating these flexible spaces positively impacts the industry, the hospitality industry, helping those operators to react to these changing consumer needs, not only limiting their use and function, but broadening and expanding their reach to a wider consumer segments, right?
Definitely. It can be on one level a challenge, right? Because you're trying to think of all of these different types of use cases and all of these different consumers that you may be targeting as a hospitality brand. But really focusing on that flexibility, there's a lot of opportunity for hospitality providers in here to, target different segments of a consumer base and really, broaden your overall appeal.
And I think when we started writing this report, what was important for us was to um, produce a report that provides insights and analysis that can help deliver innovation, enhance customer engagement, but also serve as an inspiration to these different market players that are operating in retailing, in travel and tourism, and see the different use of and the functionality of the different buildings and how they can become closer to their customer base. So, our report is giving a very interesting snapshot of the six most important trends that we're seeing for 2022, and we're going in more in depth with specific case studies that can highlight the usability of those trends in everyday life.
Absolutely. So, with that said, should we dive on into the six themes?
Absolutely.
Great. Well, I'll go ahead and kick us off then. Our first theme that we included in the report is biophilic design, and specifically the growth of this sort of design within hospitality providers. And so the basics of biophilic design is it's really a movement where physical spaces are imitating and taking inspiration from nature in their designs. What we're seeing across the hospitality industry is a lot of different operators, travel providers, a lot of airports, for example, are really trying to mimic the sort of natural feel of the outside world indoors. And, I think what's really interesting here is this isn't just a design trend. It's really looking at how physical space intersects with both wellness and sustainability. So coming out of the pandemic, a lot of consumers have a really difficult relationship now with being indoors after being in lockdown for a year or more. Many of these consumers, are looking to be in outdoor spaces. They associate that with being safer. At the same time, there's a real growing interest among consumers globally for sustainability and sort of looking to these types of buildings, looking to spaces that really imbue the feeling of the natural world. It prioritizes the feeling of sustainability and sort of working towards having greener spaces within the hospitality industry.
How interesting. And, especially when you're traveling and the airport provides this environment as a tourist, it's such an exciting but also a very calming for the consumer itself, isn't it? Because you always have this pressure, time wise, and a lot of people in one place, and having these biophilic designs are helping to calm down and to enjoy the travel and enjoy the trip itself.
And I think that's something that, as we've seen travel really come back in 2022, and coming back a lot faster than many analysts had predicted, even in the second half of last year, it's become a very stressful experience, and certainly um, a lot of airports are being overwhelmed, and it's becoming very difficult to manage that situation. So I think these sorts of trends, like biophilic design, are really coming in to counteract that and sort of act as a way to allow consumers to enjoy the experience, allow them to enjoy the sort of the magic of travel.
Absolutely. So let me kick with another trend and highlight another trend, which is social commerce goes physical. And I quite like that because it's really showcasing how social commerce players are opening more physical retail spaces to engage with the customer. And I think this is quite important, especially as the high street is becoming and is struggling really on the back of the pandemic, and there are a lot of closures and empty spaces that we can see there. I think with the advertising costs increasing very sharply in social media, the customer acquisition is becoming very dear for most of these operators, and they're thinking outside of the box very much and venturing into the world of brick and mortar. And if you've told me, I don't know, a couple of years ago that that would be happening, I would probably question that. But now we're seeing this that is seen as a way to diversify their customer base outside of the digital space, right? And we're seeing the likes of Meta, Instagram, TikTok, all of these players, you know, going into and securing high traffic areas in shopping malls or premium urban neighborhoods to open up pop-up stores or to capitalize on demise of the high street, as I've said earlier. And that is helping them to combine their deep knowledge of online selling and integrating and applying that with the in-store customer experience. And I really like what, for example, TikTok has done, and they've opened and joined forces with virtual dining concepts, and they're establishing TikTok kitchens in the US, which is so exciting. And you can see all these seasonal menus based on what is the most popular food on social media, and then you can go into the restaurant and actually try it, right? So I think that appeals to quite diverse customer base, but also is showcasing how they're expanding on their and looking into new business verticals and trying to have a longevity of their brand, as well as profiting from shift towards more prepared food and monetizing on those opportunities. So I feel that this is a great example of leadership and proactiveness as well.
Yeah, when we were talking about the themes originally, this one I found just very exciting. I think it's really speaks just to the intrinsic value of physical space. I think you mentioned this a minute or so ago, but there's a lot of discussion about death of the high street and what is the actual value of physical storefronts now, and especially now that e-commerce has grown so quickly. But seeing brands like Meta and TikTok, investing in physical spaces and these pop-up experiences really drives home that even as digital shopping continues growing, there's still real value to just having a physical location, easily in the neighborhood of your target consumers.
Absolutely, I agree with you.
So maybe then I'll move us to one of our other themes, and this is redesigning stadium experiences. So I think one area that's really interesting within the overall space of hospitality is sports, and something that we're seeing within sports operators is. A lot of them are redesigning and sort of remodeling their stadiums. And the goal of this is really to sort of personalize the stadium experience for their fans. So previously, in older stadium designs, we may have seen a much more templatized experience, especially for the average fan who's paying, not a very expensive admission price. They come in, they can get some food at just beyond the gate, and they go and watch the game from their seats. What we're seeing now, though, is a real push in order to give these viewers and give fans an option for how they want to experience the match. There are different viewing areas within the stadium. Different bars and really restaurants within it that are much more than concession stalls we may have previously seen. And these really give fans different viewing options so that they can see the game on their own terms. And even beyond, watching the physical game itself, they're really trying to keep fans within the area of the stadium beyond the match. So activities near the stadium, really brand building opportunities for these teams. It's all part of just pulling in fans and allowing them to choose, hey, what type of experience do I want on match day, and what relationship do I want with my favorite team. And I think this is a really exciting way that a space, right? A stadium is one thing, can be personalized into multiple different types of experiences for fans who visit it.
Another interesting trend that we've identified as part of our work is YOLO economy meets hospitality. So, what is YOLO? This is you only live once economy, which is embraced by the millennials and Generation Z, and is very much redefining the physical space in the hospitality. I think very much on the back of the pandemic, we've seen that a lot of workers were reconsidering their careers and lifestyle choices. And, they've experienced job losses or the loss of loved ones. And that has all brought up that necessity to rethink what are your next steps as a person, as a customer, and where do you want to take your development going further. And this, by all means, has also redefined the way that we're using office space, for example, embracing more remote open office environments, which are very much location independent, and rethinking space as a service. And there is quite a lot of interest in workations worldwide where you can go anywhere in the world and work from that destination remotely. And I think this has been quite popular, especially in 2022. We're hearing that Airbnb is, allowing its employees to work remotely. For example, Lufthansa is gearing and providing offers for Lufthansa Global Space Initiative, where they're offering private offices, meeting rooms, and accommodations across different destinations. But equally, TUI is also offering vacation packages. So I feel this is very much redefining the way that we're seeing ourselves within that space, how we work, and also kind of embracing the changes that we're seeing in the business travel. From a tourism perspective, we know that business travel has been struggling, and we expect that business travel will take longer to recover to the pre crisis levels. And that is giving the opportunity for these companies to be able to combine the opportunities of another destination where you can have all the perks of the business travel, and you can combine leisure with business. So I feel this is a whole new world that we're exploring going forward.
Yeah, and speaking of whole new worlds, one of the six themes that we worked on together was about the metaverse, and in the report we called it Metaverse Space 3.0. And I think we call it that in the report because we're seeing it, as a third type of space. So maybe a primary or first space being physical spaces, second type being digital spaces, and the metaverse now being this third type of space. Um, Obviously, the metaverse is a relatively new technology, especially in its adoption by brands. But there's a lot of really interesting ways that brands are playing with this and sort of trying to figure out how they can use it to create connections with their customers and really build that relationship with them. I think one of these ways that you're trying to do that is delivering immersive experiences and really making these immersive experiences more accessible. So, previously you may have had to travel somewhere for an immersive experience. It may have been harder to access it. The metaverse is really promising, a much more democratized access to those experiences. And, a lot as the technology develops, I think we're expecting to see, an overall boost in customer engagement. And, there's really sort of untold potential right now in terms of just how far it could go in terms of what companies might be able to do as they use it to interact with their fans and customers. So obviously, this is a massive space within the report. So Nadia, I'd be curious, what are your thoughts on the metaverse and how you see
Well, I
hospitality
think it's
providers
vast, as
using
you
it, both
said, and
maybe
we're only
some of
scratching
the
the end of
upsides
the
to it, but also
surface, if you
potential
want,
pitfalls.
if you think about it. But virtual concerts, digital meetings, hotels, restaurants, entertainment and gaming, try before you buy services, all that is potentially being offered by the metaverse operators. And I think the positives that I can see through there is delivering that immersive experience that we've talked about from the beginning of the podcast, but also supporting businesses when they have staff shortages or when you want to boost that interaction with the customer. You have this unlimited capacity and potential, and you also have opportunities to inspire your customer, right, in terms of different related tourism related purchases or retail related purchases. But of course, you also need to be very careful because it's unpredictable. We don't know the whole view of the metaverse. We're only now starting to explore it. And driving physical separation and losing that touch with the reality sometimes can lead to some problems. And of course, we also need to think about the regulations, the personal data collection, the privacy, the security, digital rights. How is that going to impact as a customer? What do we need to do in case this is being infringed? And also, I think when we mentioned earlier the workations and the stress related aspects, how is that going to impact our mental health as well? Being solely focusing and using, that channel, if you want, of digital spaces. Um, is that going to drive technological singularity, and how is that going to impact our well-being? These are the questions that I have, which I think probably within the next couple of months will be revealed and explored in more detail.
Yeah, and I think, all those concerns that you're talking about really just underline, I think, what we've been saying, or what we say throughout the report, that hospitality providers can't just focus on one type of space or one type of service, right? They really need to be fluid in their approach to these spaces and the services that they're providing within them. And certainly going too far down the road of any one of them may
And that
raise
leads me very
more
nicely to our
challenges than
last
taking a more
trend, which
balanced
is the
approach and looking
multifunctional
to the
spaces.
pros
And
of
I
each
think
type of
it's
space.
very much on the back of blurring this between work, play, and home life, which continues to drive that increased demand for hybrid spaces. And, the lodging establishments have been kind of trying to rethink how they can address that multifunctionality so that they're able to expand and increase their revenue streams. And I quite like this concept, which is not new but has been intensified coming out of the initial lockdown period. The student hotel chain, which is offering various types of residential products alongside more work flexibility, traditional single use hotels. And that is being, searched and demanded from other players who want to. Increase the people centered spaces to have that flexibility to ensure that they offer that one-stop shop if you want to managing their buildings, creating places that are spacious, energy efficient, that they're open to the local communities, and serving as destinations where activities and events can take place rather than just a pure hotel where you go stay overnight and you leave. So it's embracing all these different uses as part of that.
Definitely. And I think, the a key consideration within that is, as hospitality providers try and broaden the appeal of their spaces, it's important to still have, a key identity for the space and a real purpose for what it's doing. I think, the danger of this is if you broaden yourself too much and you try and become that sort of catch-all space, you're not really going to get every consumer by doing that. So there's a lot of potential in creating these multi-purpose spaces and sort of opening up at different points of the day, but hospitality providers at the same time
And
need to be
Alex,
careful
now
not
that in our
to
concluding
overstretch
remarks of
themselves
this
and try and
podcast,
do too much with
what are
one
the key
individual
industry
space.
takeaways that you would like to highlight and give as advice to our customer base that is listening to this podcast?
I think the key takeaway goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning of this podcast, and the choice is really with the consumers right now. And it's, the role of hospitality providers to be giving consumers these options between types of spaces, whether it's a physical space with digital elements or, a metaverse experience that ties back into the physical world. I think really listening to customers and figuring out what sort of balance they may want in different areas of hospitality between these different types of spaces is going to be really key as hospitality providers
I would like to add as
work
well from my
to
perspective, I
cement their
think
strategy
another
around different types
important
of
aspect would
spaces
be
over the coming
sustainability.
years.
It is no longer nice to have, it is a must have for these market operators. It's not necessary only to be in the annual report and just provide information to your customer base. What are your intentions? What are your strategies? But you need to act on that because the consumers are very much choosing those brands that are acting on this, finding that connection between the health and sustainability, and how is that being embraced in the spaces that they're working, living, shopping, or enjoy as a concept. So I think it's very important that you as a business you need to create those memorable destinations, but thinking about the sustainability aspects of it and how you address the needs for more sustainable products, for how it is being involved in the energy efficiency of the building, and how you deliver on day-to-day demands of the customer. So for me, that is paramount and of increased importance across the board, not only in the travel industry, but retailing, consumer food service, or any other industry that has been mentioned earlier in the podcast.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of these trends may have grown over the course of the pandemic, but that doesn't mean they're only pandemic trends. And I think we only expect to see these trends, whether it be about sustainability or consumer choice in terms of
Thank you very
space,
much, Alex, for
continue
joining
to
me
gain steam
today
and gain
for
importance
this joint
over the next five
podcast. And
years.
for our listeners and clients, please feel free to download our report, The Evolution of Physical Space in Hospitality, if you would like to learn a little bit more about all these interesting and very dynamic trends in the hospitality segment. Thank you.